Welcome back to Spirit Music Meetups. Mike Burris here. We've been going through some really great blogs on love, and this is blog topic 8. This is just really revelational stuff. So there's downward love that overflows from God. That is unconditional love, right? And this unconditional love is not a thing or a product that God has or possesses. It is His very nature. We saw that in the previous blogs. And this is really dives into 1 John 4, 7 through 8. All right, so this is furthermore, I said furthermore from the previous blogs. You got to read those. Because of my math background, I started seeing equations as God gave me understanding. In the previous blogs, I started seeing these equations. It helps me to see complex ideas easier. So He's given me math, can you believe it? But it's like 2 hours of revelation, but it just freaks you out when it happens. So He says unconditional love is God. That is L equals G. Love equals God. That's what He says. Unconditional love is God. Just as God is love. 1 John 4, 8. So this is equity, the equality of equations, right? L equals G because G is equal to L. And all the descriptive adjective nouns that we see in Galatians 5, 22 and 23 and 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 6, they all are similar adjectives. And it says unconditional love exists as as patience. It exists as love, love is patient. Love is kind. So these are the same things that Paul's talking about. They're the flavors of the singular nature or essence of the Spirit, the singular fruit. Thus, unconditional love exists. It exists, right, as the flavors, and all of this from the singular nature of God. So all these flavors are what you experience, what we experience, facets of one diamond, flavors of one fruit, one essence, one nature. And that is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're all one God. And this is profound. So 1 John 4, 7 through 8 says, Beloved, let us unconditionally love one another. That was from the previous blog. That's what Jesus said to do. Just as I have loved you, Jesus said. That's my new commandment. Not love your neighbor as yourself. Not even close. He said this is completely different in kind. Kainos means nothing like anything you ever heard. Doesn't share anything with, it's a patent term. So it has nothing to do with love your neighbor as yourself. This is love one another reciprocally, mutually, just as I have loved you. And he says, 1 John 4, 7 through 8, let us love one another. This is a strong urging in the Greek. For this unconditional love exists or is defined as out from God. This is out from the interior of God. So L is equal to G. Love is God. It comes out of the interior, inward reality of God. And thus, everyone routinely, unconditionally loving. See, this love that is happening is not something created by us inside the box. That was from one of the earlier blogs. God said, no, it's not from inside the box. It's from me, because it is me, outside the box, that created all things for me, through me, by me, to me. You get it? It's all about me. So L equal G, and thus everyone who is routinely, habitually, as a lifestyle, unconditionally loving, this person has been begotten out of, or the interior of God. Begotten is like a birth thing, birthed, begotten, comes from within the interior of God, and coupled to this, experientially, relationally knows God. Anyone who, okay, so that's a profound statement. See, love is not this thing. It's a person. It's God. It's God's nature. And so John is saying, look, love is God. God is love. That's the equality of the equation. God is love. Love is God, because that's what love is, and that's what God is. And so anyone who is routinely doing this love, right, has to have come from God. This is unconditional, no strings. This is not like the world loves. This is supernatural love. Hating your enemies, turning the other cheek. This is like out of this world love. Has been begotten, like the only begotten Son, out of God, because this is where love comes from. And coupled to this, it's linked, relationally knows God. Well, yeah, because you came out from God, and you're going to relationally know this God that you are out from. Anyone who is not in possibility, routinely loving, has absolutely, in fact, not already, because he's talking to people who claim to be Christians, but they're murdering Christians. They're stealing from Christians. They're taking Christians to prison. And back in those days, you would rot in prison. You would die in prison because they wouldn't pay back what they owed. So they're saying, wait a second, if you hate your brother, how can you possibly know God? Anyone who is not impossibly, routinely, unconditionally loving has absolutely, in fact, not already experientially, relationally known God, because God is love. So you see, he's just saying, like, this is an impossibility. If you're hating your brother, murdering your brother, jailing your brother until he rots in prison, this is terrible. This you can't possibly know God. I don't care what you say you do. It's impossible, right? Because God cannot live within you, right? You cannot be doing these things and say you know God, because God is love. This is directly tying horizontal love of Christians to the vertical love from God to us. That not only comes out of the interior of God, it comes out of the interior of God because it's his very nature. John isn't arguing that we love our neighbor as ourselves. Absolutely not. Out of obligation to follow some Old Testament commandment. This is no New Testament writer does. Or even to unconditionally love one another as I have loved you. So this is not saying, we just want you to obey a commandment. Jesus said, this is my new commandment, love one another as I have loved you. And this is important, which far eclipses love your neighbor as yourself. But it's not even talking, John's not even going there yet. He's not saying just, because you heard a commandment, you got to obey some commandment. No, it's not about just following rules, right? The commandment is just a rule. Right? Whether it's the Old Testament or a New Testament, which are nothing like each other. That's what new commandment. I give you a new commandment. But it's still not about following rules. Although Christians have this one commandment, right? And there's a blog about this. He's arguing that Christians have been begotten. They've been born again out from the interior of God, who is unconditional love. That's where they came from. So naturally, they would exist, his nature. They would exhibit, his nature or essence. Naturally, if they came from there, they would have his nature. And can you see the symmetry property of equality in mathematics? G equals L and L equals G. Yeah, love is God. God is love. He said that. And he says it again later on in verse 16. And that means love is God. Your love for God, your love for others, is God living within you. And that is the Christian message. Christ in you, the hope of glory. The singular fruit of the Spirit is the Lord living inside you, dwelling within you permanently, it says in Romans chapter 8, verse 1. It says, here's another also. Also, if a Christian, C, is born or originated from God, so I see G produces C, and is thus in intimate fellowship with God, that's koinonia, as his child, begotten, right? Begotten child. And if unconditional love is God, L equals G, because G equals L, and if unconditional love comes out of the interior of God, G produces L, then by substituting love for God, because everywhere you see the word love, you can put G, God. Everywhere you see the word God, you can put love. That really changes the reading of the New Testament. This turns God into begetting Christians. G, love, begets Christians. G, begets Christians. Yeah, Christians are begotten from God into unconditional. So we change God creates Christians, right? Begot, we are begotten of God. We change that into L begots Christians. Love, unconditional love, begets Christians. You see how that works? Which is exactly what the message of John 3:16 says, that God so unconditionally loved the world that we are begotten from God's unconditional loving nature or essence. So Christians are begotten from God. We are called as children. So let's go look at that in John 3:16. John 3:16. For God so loved the world, there's love, because he is love, that he gave his only son, he begot his son. Boom. He begot his son. God begot his son. That whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. So he begots his son. Where does it say he begots Christians? And it says that we may be saved through him. Well, children of God. We are called children of God. Okay. 1 John 3:1 says, maybe that's what I was referring to. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so are we. And so are we. 1 John 3:1. But there's a lot of other places that talk about this. And let's see. Children of God. John 1:12. But to all who did receive Christ, who have faith in his name, which means authority, he gave the right to become begotten children of God. There we go. And so that's pretty clear, isn't it? Yeah. In 1 John 3:10, by this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. See, brethren. So 1 John 5:2, by this we know that we love the children of God. When we love God and obey his commandments. And there's only 2 commandments: to have faith in God. It says that just earlier in the verse, 3:23, 1 John 3:23. To have faith in the Son whom he sent, and to love one another just as Jesus commanded us. So we are begotten. So love begets the Son, Jesus Christ. And he begets us as children of God. We are begotten as children of God through our faith and dependence in His Son. Isn't that amazing? Wow, that is amazing. Wow. Which is exactly the gospel logos message. That He so unconditionally loved the world that we are begotten from God's unconditional loving nature. This is a vertical fellowship of God's unconditional love flowing down towards us, making us completely different, new in kind creations. New in kind creations. So you see how that love and faith are very closely related. That's why they're integrated together in 1 John 3:23, using a coupler. There's only one commandment from God. Only one. It has two parts. To have faith presently and ongoingly in the name, that is authority, of His Son Jesus Christ. And coupled to this, love one another just as He, that is Jesus Christ, has commanded us. Entole, universally binding, official decree from a king. There's only two, all through the New Testament. It's not love God with all your heart, mind. That's the old covenant, which we're supposed to have died to, by the way. We're not even supposed to be quoting it, let alone, we just died to it. Why are we quoting it? Why are we saying we need to obey? If you obey any part of the Old Testament, you think we got to do this. This is the old covenant, right? It was written for little children that had not reached sonship. Aren't we supposed to be sons now? Why are we going back to something that was written for little children? That's what it says. You know, one covenant replaced the other. Hebrews says the second replaced the first. Why are we reading old manuscripts of something that no longer applies to us? That's what Paul says. It doesn't apply to you anymore. It's been abolished. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15. So it's just mind-boggling. It's like reading old loans that were paid off for us. You know, loan for my house. But then somebody paid off the loan for me and gave me a lien release. And we're going back and reading these old lien releases going, ooh, look at this. You know, it tells me that I owe such and such. And I got to do this. And I got to do this. And I got to do this. Or they'll take it away from me. They'll take my house away from me. That's what the old covenant was. Lots of conditions, you know, pages and pages of conditions. Just like my loan for my house. Pages and pages of fine print. That's just fear. That is pure fear. Reading the old loan. That just made me cringe every month having to make that payment. And working my butt off to just make the payment barely. So we're going to go into another part of this. It's going to talk more about this, but put your ideas so far down there below and we'll go from there. All right. God bless.